see a few more people dialing in, which is great. You're absolutely in the right place for the strengths webinar today. Those numbers are rocketing now, so that's great. We're 1 minute away from kind of kickoff, so we know a few people will still be dialing in, which is no problem. But just a reassurance that all of the students who are dialing in now, you are in the right place.
Yeah, so I'd like to welcome you, and as Ellie said, we'll be starting in a minute, but you are in the right place for strengths.
Okay, I can see a few more people dialing in, and as I say, if a few people are a few minutes late, that's absolutely no problem, but I am conscious of the fact that we're due to start at 1:30 and all of you are in the right place, so we want to make sure that we do kick off then. First and foremost, I just want to say thank you all to the listeners who are dialing in. That's brilliant, and thanks for joining us today. I'm going to hand over to kind of our special guest who's going to be leading the session, who can introduce herself and the session today. But before we do that, I want to just let you know in terms of logistics around the session, how you can ask questions, how you can interact with us, and how what that looks like for you, because I want to make sure you feel completely kind of comfortable asking questions throughout, because that's really important and really big part of the session. So there are a number of ways you can ask questions and kind of interact with us today. One of those is through the Q&A box. If you're dialed in on your computer, which the majority of you I know will be, you can ask any questions through that Q&A box. That's absolutely fine. So throughout the whole session, we will be going through some content, but don't hesitate to ask any questions through that Q&A box. Equally, there is the chat box. So predominantly that will be us kind of sharing information with you, which you might be able to see at the moment. There are a few little bits of information in there, which I can explain more in 1 second, but that's the chat box as well. So if you feel like you want to, you can definitely go ahead and ask any questions in the chat box. For the couple of you, I know it looks like there are a couple of phone call-in listeners. That's also absolutely fine. We will be kind of like voicing everything we're talking about to make it understandable for you. So don't worry about that, because you can ask any questions via the number which texted you to remind you about this webinar today. So you would have got a text in the last few minutes just reminding you to join today. And any questions you have throughout the session, our team at Pathway CTM will be taking in those questions and kind of responding to them, and I'll be feeding those into our kind of guest speaker here today. So absolutely don't worry about asking any questions if you're dialed in on the phone. That's completely possible too. And just forth to that, just in terms of asking any questions, if you feel like you can't text at the same time as listening in, no problem, and you're not dialed in on your computer, we also have our student@Pathway CTM email address. So any questions you might have, just remember to drop your name in there, and any question you might have with referencing this kind of strengths webinar today, and we'll make sure to pick them up in real time. So we've got lots and lots of kind of options and ways to ask questions there. So that's how you can navigate this webinar with us today. Firstly, I know that we've sent through the kind of strengths profile to all of you who've been selected for today's session. So firstly, well done for being selected. You've kind of interacted with Pathway CTM in a way that we've given this opportunity to you. So definitely make the most of that. I know over half of you have actually filled out the strengths profile, which is great, and we'll be talking about that a bit more in a second. But those of you who haven't, don't worry at all, that won't hinder today's session. So if you can see the chat box, then you'll be able to copy and paste the link from that chat box, which takes you to the Cappfinity website, and you'll be able to download the second section on that website page called Strengths Definitions, and that gives you an overview of all of the kind of strengths profiles which are available. So I'm sure that we'll be going in, the expert in this field will be talking in a bit more detail about that, but just so you know, from our side at Pathway CTM, if you want to copy and paste that and you haven't yet had a chance to do your strengths profile, put that into your kind of search box, and you can download the definitions, which we'll be talking about later in the session. So that's definitely one thing you can do. And any kind of issues, technical issues with that, as I say, text in, write into the Q&A box, and we're here to kind of help and support you throughout. So those are my kind of housekeeping kind of rules there in terms of questions and how the session is going to work. But I think enough from me now, and over to kind of the expert who we've got on today's session. So Lauren, thank you for today. It'll be great to get a bit of an introduction and a bit more around yourself and the session today.
Awesome. So I'd just like to welcome everybody to today's session. I'm so pleased that you've managed to take an hour out of your day to spend it with myself and Ellie. So I'm Lauren Scarlett. I'm the Strengths Profile Consultant from Cappfinity. I have a background in business psychology and all things to do with kind of recruitment and development. So I've been in this space now for quite some time. So if you have any other questions, you know, more broadly around recruitment, do kind of feel free to drop that in the chat too. We can talk to that towards the end of the today's session. But as Ellie did mention, if you've completed a profile, well done. If you can have it to hand on your phone or in front of you on a computer, that's perfect. And for those of you who don't, please don't worry, just download the definitions so that you can take part later on in the slides. So give us all your questions as you have them, as they come to mind. But I hope you enjoyed today's session and get something from it that will, you know, really strengthen your career going forward and just help you make better career decisions that are right for you. So in terms of today's session, we're going to cover, you know, a bit about the strengths profile approach. And what we mean by the approach are the 4 colored boxes. So for those of you who do have your profile, if you have that page with the 4 boxes to hand, that would be great. So you want to learn more about how to take action with your strengths and what they mean in the different boxes when we refer to the model of development. And through knowing our strengths and where our performance and our energy is in terms of the model for ourselves, what we can do then is really own our future career and the decisions and next steps that we hope to be taking later on in the year in terms of employment. So a bit of housekeeping about, you know, who are Cappfinity. So Cappfinity, we were founded in 2005 and we're a talent technology based business and we specialize in recruitment and development solutions. So what that essentially means is when you apply for jobs to a lot of the employers and recruiters and all the processes that you go through before landing your perfect job, we design a lot of those assessments and processes. So we know the ins and outs of what goes behind the scenes really to get those jobs. So we are a team globally. We operate in the UK, Australia and America in terms of our presence, in terms of offices. We're a team of 150 psychologists, assessors, coaches. We've got engineers and technologists and all kinds of other areas of our business too. We are award-winning, so a lot of our clients would have won awards for their recruitment processes through our assessments. So if you want to know more about that, I can touch base with you offline. But ultimately, Cappfinity, we are the strengths experts and we specialize in selection and development assessments for you guys. So you may or may not know, but at the moment, 43% of employers now use some form of strengths-based recruitment processes in some way. Now, I put that stat on the screen for you, not to kind of, you know, make you fall off the chair, but to make you think, you know, at some point in your careers, strengths is going to come up for you, whether it's for recruitment or development, both now or in 5 years' time. At some point, the word strengths will be used. So I think the sooner you get more familiar with the term and what it means, it will just strengthen you and kind of give you the heads up on any process that you decide to go for in the future. So yeah, strengths is big and quite a few employers are now using it. So just bear in mind that almost half of the employers are now using some form of strength. So that can be just for the assessment center or for the interviews. or it can be for the whole thing. So from your application through to your video interview, through to you know, the situational strengths tests, all of these different elements, companies can use some of it or all of it. So today is part one of strengths. It's really about introducing you to strengths and what it is. And we will have a follow-up session with another consultant from Cappfinity that will go into more detail around, okay, so after today and we've got to know our strengths, how we then apply them throughout the various different processes. So watch this space for part two of your strengths webinars. So who are these employers that are using strengths? You may be thinking, you know, I'm okay, 43% of who. So you might be able to see on the screen here quite a few brands. Some of these are household names that we are all familiar with, particularly at this moment, being at home. Sky is probably something that we all are aware of. So absolutely, these are brands that you may be thinking to apply to, or you have your eye on, both now and in the future. But all of these employers that you see on the screen are on their strengths journey too, and they are using some form of strengths-based assessment. So you knowing your strengths today and being able to talk about your strengths, when you interact with all of these employers, they'll know what you're talking about and be able to, you know, speak the same language in terms of you showcasing your best self. So I think a great question next is, you know, well, why are all of these employers really using strengths? You know, why are they using strengths and not competencies? And we will come to that next week in our session, you know, in terms of the differences between strengths and how that plays out in an interview. So rather than me to go into the technical definition of strengths and why we use it just too soon, I'm going to go into a little exercise here, and I'm going to ask Ellie if you could unmute yourself. And so rather than me tell you about strength, we're going to kind of see it firsthand and kind of give you an insight into what the employer will see when they see you face to face. So Ellie, if you could talk for 30 seconds about something that drains you. This can be anything, Ellie. And for everybody on the call, if you could just observe what you see, perhaps even drop some notes in the chat function. You know, what are you noticing in terms of Ellie's body language, her tone of voice? Yeah, just let me know what you see as Ellie's talking. Over to you, Ellie.
Yeah, so if I had to think of one thing that really drains me is kind of, I just get really worried in terms of inputting data. So obviously in terms of personal life or work life, then that's something that I find really quite stressful, because even for example on, you know, bank statements and making sure that you've got the right numbers when you're kind of filling in your online banking, or you're applying to things and you know you have to get your account number and your sort code right. Even at work sometimes when you're trying to put in, you know, manual data of people's names and things which are actually kind of, you have to get right in order to get the data correct. I find that quite stressful, because I think that, you know, the really, really close attention to detail, it just really kind of concerns me. It concerns me that I'm not going to get it actually spot on, and I get a bit like anxious about the concept that something that I could do quite manually, missing a number, or could, you know, have a real big impact in terms of, yeah, my personal finances, or even kind of relating to data which is related to my work as well. So like the concept of, yeah, having to put in manual numbers and codes and things like that, I find quite stressful, because I find it a little bit daunting. You know, looking at a spreadsheet and making sure everything's aligned, it's just having that kind of knowledge that actually, you know, one kind of misaligned number but could have quite a detrimental effect. So I find that a bit intimidating.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you for sharing that 30 seconds of something that drained you, Ellie. So I can see in the chat that someone mentioned low tone of voice, which is great. If anybody else noticed anything else in Ellie, please do drop it in the chat. So we don't want to leave you feeling drained. So now I'm going to ask you, Ellie, to talk about something that you love to do for 30 seconds. And again, everybody on the call, if we could just notice the difference in Ellie's body language or her tone of voice, or, you know, what do you notice in terms of the difference when she's talking about something she loves? So again, over to you.
Yeah, so I think what I find I really like doing, I guess, is essentially what we're doing today, which is kind of communication and talking to people and like enabling things like this to happen. So the idea that there's loads of students on the line listening to you, Lauren, giving them kind of that insight about, you know, what they could do in the future. I love the idea of like connecting people which might not necessarily have been connected before, and giving them a chance to, you know, talk about what their futures might be like. So yeah, whether it's an old person down the street or whether it's a young child, like I just like chatting and communicating with people, really.
Awesome. Okay, so thank you for talking about something you love to do, and hopefully you, within yourself, you felt more energized through talking about something that you love to do. So thank you for all the people that have dropped, you know, your suggestions in the chat. So I'm just going to share a few with you. So on the positives, we noticed smiling a lot, a positive tone of voice, faster and more upbeat, just more energized. I also noticed your eyebrows were smiling, your face was smiling, you know, you sat up more in your chair. So it's great that you guys noticed the differences between, you know, something that drains you and something that you love to do. Now, if we think back to the, you know, when Ellie was talking about something she was drained by, you know, have a think about this in terms of your career. You know, what would it feel like to spend a week, you know, a term or a year in that space? You know, how would, you know, is it sustainable? It's not really something you want to see in somebody else or experience for yourself. So I'm just going to go on now into the differences between, you know, when we're in our areas of weakness, so things that drain us, versus our areas of strength. So as you guys have, you know, brilliantly pointed out here, you know, she just seemed more drained when she was talking about something that, you know, didn't particularly energize her. I also noticed her body language was quite withdrawn. So she was just more slumped forward and sighing. And we do point out these things in terms of strength spotting, because ultimately, when you have behavioural assessments for your recruitment processes, so things like assessment centres and interviews, the employers are seeing your behaviour and the words. So it's being mindful that, you know, they are strength spotting, and that's how they kind of assess. So they notice your behaviours and stories. You know, if they feel inauthentic, you know, sometimes when we're drained, our responses tend to be shorter. And also our examples tend to be from quite a while back in time, versus when we're talking about our strengths, you know, we're more passionate, focused, animated. As you guys said, you know, we're smiling, more upbeat, our tone of voice is more positive. So noticing the difference in yourselves in terms of when you're feeling slightly drained versus when you're feeling more energized, and how you show up at the various different recruitment processes is going to be really great in terms of, you know, just having that awareness and being able to put forward your best self. Another thing to note in terms of our strengths, we're usually quicker to learn, and usually we volunteer for things. So before someone's even finished their sentence, you know, would anybody like to, you know, your hand's already up, or you've already said, yeah, I'd like to do it. It doesn't even need to go on a to-do list because it's already been done. So being mindful that, you know, we have natural preferences and strengths for things that we just want to do. And for those of us who are slightly quieter, and you know, in psychology, we use the word introvert. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that term, but, you know, it's not to think that, oh, I have to be, you know, extroverted and the life and soul of the assessment center in order to score the job. It's noticing how you feel energized and how you want to show up. You know, you could be energized by just smiling more, or sitting up in your chair, or, you know, your eyes start to sparkle. These are the things that give you energy, and that's how your strengths show up. So, you know, we still need to be strengthened, but authentically to who we are. So just another bit on how the strengths can benefit you. So another reason why employers, you know, like their employees, they recruit for strengths, and then they also develop you based on strengths, is because they know people who use their strengths at work are more happier, they're more confident, they have higher energy and increased productivity. And, you know, of course, that has benefits for the organization. So more productivity equals, you know, better revenue, better targets, better outputs in terms of team and organization. They know if you're using your strengths, you're likely to reduce your stress and also increase your resilience. So particularly during tough times like we are in now, you know, for the employers that are, you know, applying strengths, you know, employees are really having to lean on their strengths in this time to get them through. And then you're more likely to achieve your goals. And we also know that when you're using your strengths, you set goals that are aligned to things that you're energized to do and achieve. So really having a think about your strengths. So if you've got your strengths profile in front of you, or the definitions, have a look at some of those words. You know, which ones really jump out at you? Which ones excite you? Which ones, you know, make you feel positive? And that's likely to be the areas that you'll want to grow your career and perhaps apply for jobs in. So I'm going to go into now. So now we've kind of seen and experienced, you know, what a strength is. I'm now going to get into the technical side of things. So do bear with me on this, but it is kind of the nuts, the crux of everything today. So if you don't listen to anything else I say, this is the bit to sit up and take note. So in terms of what is a strength, so there are 3 core elements that we measure strengths by at Strengths Profile, and that's performance, energy, and use. So often when we ask people, what are your strengths, or what do we think a strength is, often people will say it's what I'm good at, or it's what my friends and family have told me I'm good at. I've always known I'm good at something. And obviously, yes, performance is an element of a strength because you need to be good at something. But how do you feel when you're using that particular strength? So to bring this to life a bit more, you know, we have things that we're good at, but we're not necessarily energized by them. And we'll come into how that fits into the model in a bit. And also we have strengths that we're really good at, but we don't use very often. So they're more likely to be a hobby for us rather than something we use day in, day out. So it's important to know, you know, which strengths do we perform well in, are we energized by, and the use, you know, using them when we need to. Do we need to use them a lot right now, or maybe we could give them a bit of a rest? So for those who completed a strengths profile, you'll know that you completed 60 questions on performance, 60 questions on energy, and then 60 questions on use. And based on your 60 questions, your 180 questions, sorry, on those 3 elements, you then get an output. So towards the boxes here on the right-hand side, the 4 colored boxes, it's called our model of development. So we have 60 strengths at Strengths Profile that we measure for. And those 60 strengths, the profile that you have in front of you will give you your top 24 and distribute them into those 4 boxes. So I'm going to go into now the model. So we know what a strength is. A strength is not just performance, but it's performance, energy, and use. And do be mindful of that, because employers also, you know, they look at strengths in a similar way. It's not just what you're good at, but they're seeing how energized you are by those strengths. How often do you use them? Do you want to keep using them, or would you not like to keep using them? So be mindful of how they are going to be, you know, assessed by the employers as well. So starting with the realized strengths. So this is the top green, the dark green box. So these are strengths that we perform well, we're energized by, and the use of these is quite high. So these are the things that we're using day in, day out. So for those of you who do have your profile in front of you, take a look at these 7 strengths. Or up to 7 strengths. You may have less in that box, and what that means is that the strengths just sit in other places in the model for you. So don't think the tool isn't broken, it's just your data and how you reported it. So these strengths are the things that you do well, you're energized by, and you use a lot. So you will recognize these strengths in yourself. Your friends and family will also probably know you for these strengths too. Have a look at each of these strengths. Think about a story for each of these strengths. You know, what is it about that humor or that relationship deepener? How do you use that daily? So start to have a think about these things, because, you know, if you go for just even a general conversation, if I would say, you know, what are your strengths? This is the box that you're more likely to call upon instantly and have your answers for that particular question. So these strengths are the things that we perform well, we're energized by, and the use is really high. So the advice is to use them wisely. Now, in terms of the model, you know, why should we use them wisely? I think, you know, sometimes we can overplay our strengths and they can then fall into what we call the learned behaviors. So this is the orange box below realized strengths. So these strengths are things that we perform well, we find de-energizing, and the use it varies around that. So the advice on the model there is, you know, use these strengths when we need to, And I think when we need to is the key bit of advice there. You know, we're good at it, but we don't necessarily need to use it all the time because we don't find it particularly energizing. However, if we need it for a particular task or goal, then we know we can call upon it because we are good at it, but just knowing how it will make you feel and how that may show up is important to keep in mind. I mean, I think, you know, a common learned behavior for most of us, if you look to your profile now, you know, work ethic or adherence, I think most of us, you know, we don't get out of bed for processes. And for those of you who might have adherence in one of your green boxes, that's fantastic. But just know that, you know, it's quite unique and special. Most of us, we just, you know, work ethic is about, whilst we enjoy working hard, we also enjoy the balance. You know, it's about, we work hard and play hard and getting that, you know, striving for that balance in life. Adherence is about following processes. Most of us follow processes because we have to, but given the choice, we'd probably like to just go with the flow or feel it out as we go along. So that's a bit about our learned behaviors. Learned behaviors are a great resource, but knowing things that we're good at, but not necessarily energized by, can really help in terms of, you know, when you're putting your best self forward for recruitment processes. So we then move along to our weaknesses. So these are things that we self-report as performing poorly, we find de-energizing, and the use varies around these weaknesses. So the advice on the model here is to use them less. And I think, you know, it's interesting to just note here that these are self-reported. So it's not the tool necessarily saying you are bad at that particular strength. It's something in your responses that made you think, well, perhaps I don't perform as well as I could or should in that particular area. And having a think about, you know, when you completed the profile, was there something particularly happening that day or that context? Maybe that will be the reason for that strength appearing there. Equally, there could be some strengths in that weaknesses quadrant that you think, do you know what, actually, I don't really like persistence or detail. You know, it's something I do, but, you know, and it's okay, but it's not my strong point. So there are going to be some weaknesses that you will just recognize and you'll think, do you know what, no, that is correct. On most days of the year, it probably will be in that box. Some of our weaknesses, though, we can get them to good enough. So they can flip back into the learned behaviors, so into the orange box, and that's great. But do be mindful that if you work on weaknesses to get them to good enough, you'll still be de-energized by them. So, you know, what is the impact of that, how you feel, and how your employer will notice that too. So just, you know, our greatest area of potential and flourishing and energy will be in our realized strengths and our unrealized strengths. So, and I'm going to go on to our unrealized strengths now. So these are things that we perform well, we find energizing, but the use here is slightly lower. So the advice on the model is to use these more. And there could be many reasons why we don't use these strengths that often. For those of you that have mission and legacy as your unrealized strengths, you know, I think it's just part and parcel of being a student. At the moment, the focus is on exams and that next step, or, you know, having a think about the purpose of, you know, what you're doing, why you're doing it. The opportunity just hasn't been there yet. But as you transition into, you know, the world of work, mission might be a strength that you actually have the opportunity to really dial up and use some more. Equally, some of our strengths could be just areas that we're just not that confident in. So we might want to get some training on them before we make them realized. So we know we're good at them and we're energized by them. So knowing that, you know, unrealized strength, it's the gold dust, it's the greatest area of potential. As you notice those unrealized strengths on your profile, have a think that these are probably strengths that you haven't noticed before because they are unrealized. So they might be new to you, and equally your friends and family around you, or even teachers. So this can be something, you know, if you share that with them, you can start working on, and maybe it can go from a 2, you know, how often do you use it? Might be a 2 out of 10 at the moment. And, you know, over time, you may want to get it to a 6 or a 7, who knows? But you can choose to dial up your strengths if you want to. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of strength. So what is a strength? It's about performance, energy, and use. And then, you know, based on our performance, energy and use, each of the 60 strengths are then populated into one of the 4 quadrants. And so I'm just going to move on to the next bit of the model, which is the 2 top boxes, so the realised and the unrealised strengths. So, because this is the area that you really want to showcase in all of the recruitment processes that you're going through currently now as you're studying. These are the areas that, you know, they're the things that you can do and you love to do, so the realised strengths. And these on the right hand side, the unrealised strengths, these are the things that you love to do, but you can use more often if you wanted to. So having a think about, you know, when you think about the model, do focus on the top 2 quadrants, because not only are they the bit that's going to give you the most energy, you're going to shine, you're going to flourish, you'll have the most stories, you'll be really excelling in what you're doing. So have a think about those 2 quadrants and the strengths that are listed in those 2 boxes. So we're going to turn now to the introductory profile. So as I just mentioned there, the realised and unrealised strengths, and you should have up to 7 realised strengths and 7 unrealised strengths, 4 learned behaviours and 3 weaknesses. If you just want to have a look at those, and also at the back of your profiles, you have the definitions, and you also have a bit of advice on each of those strengths and what it means for you, and a bit of advice and tips in terms of using it wisely. So I'm just going to pause there for a moment, and if there are any questions so far, do you want to pop that in the chat? How are we doing for questions there, Ellie? So I can see a question in one of the chat is, how do you know if you're passionate about something? So if we think back to performance, energy and use, how do you know if you're passionate about something? So through energy, absolutely. And if you're talking about something, how energized do you come across when you're talking about it? I think it's kind of will be in the body language. Yeah, passion comes from noticing your body language. You could equally be passionate about something, but not necessarily from a performance perspective good at it. So I think it's about aligning passion with performance, particularly when you're trying to showcase that to your future employers. So hopefully that answers your question there in terms of passion. Passion is energy, and it can also be performance too, but noticing for you what gives you that buzz. You know, when you're doing something, you completely forget about time and space and whatever it is, you're just in the zone. That's likely to be an area of passion for you. So on the screen here, we have the introductory profile. So do take a look at your profile. As this next, there's going to be an exercise here that I'm going to need a bit of interaction from you guys. And I'll have a question for you. So have your profiles to hand. If you don't have your profile to hand, if you could download the strengths definition. So as Ellie mentioned at the beginning of the chat, there was a link, and you can follow that link and download the definitions. So profiles and definitions to hand. We have our first question. So in the chat, if you could let me know, which strengths are you most proud of and why? I can see we have rapport builder. Rapport builder, that's great. Pride, yes, that means you enjoy working hard. And some people, if it's in the green box for you, I'm sure people will have to remind you to take a break because you're so in the zone. So that's awesome. Detail, wow, we have someone with detail. That's fantastic. That's usually the #1 learned behavior globally, so really celebrate that strength for you. We also have adherence, gosh, wow. Self-awareness, humor's a great one to have in the workplace, and teams appreciate it. Lightening the mood, it's a great strength to have. planner and strategic awareness. Awesome. And let me know why you're proud of having these strengths. Resilience and bounce back. Those are great strengths to have, particularly during this time we're in now. Awesome. So thank you for everybody so I've got one here, humility. It helps to connect with people. Absolutely. So having a think about these strengths, you know, the strengths like humility, rapport builder, connector, relationship deepener, these are what we call relating strengths. So if they're going to be in your green box, they're likely that, you know, you get energy from people. You know, you really like to connect with people, whether it's, if it's rapport builder, it could just be a hi, how are you? If it's the relationship deepener, you really want to get to the crux of, you know, what is it you really want to have that deep conversation and probably help that person. Your friends will love speaking with you because they just love those conversations. Organizer is a great one to have. You know, who loves, you know, helping structure and keeping the timetables. That's a great thing to have, particularly when you're in the run up to exam time. So thank you all for sharing that. So we're going to go now into the next bit in terms of some more reflections on your profile. So hopefully you've still got your profile and the definitions to hand. And we've got 3 main questions on the screen here. So let's start with the first one. You know, maybe just take notes, maybe write these questions down. But on the chat, I put your role here, but you know, which strengths support you the most today? So for those of you who have, you know, written your planner and strategic awareness, or organizer, humility, you know, how do these strengths help you today? And on the next slide, I've got examples of what, how the strengths can help. But I just want you guys to have a think about, you know, what it is. So yeah, we've got one here that says competitive for sport participation. Absolutely, you know, we want to win. We don't just want to take part. So that's how competitive is helping you most today. And if we think about how can that be applied to the world of work? Well, if you're in a sales role, that's brilliant. You know, you want to win, you want to pitch your work, you want to impress the client, you want to be the best in your industry. So that's awesome. Is there anybody else that has any, you know, has had a think about how their realized strengths are helping them currently?
So you can hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, so we can hear you.
We've just had one in about competitiveness.
Yeah, competitiveness. So yeah, we talked about that's great for sport, and it could be great in sales if you're thinking about applying for roles within organizations. I've got another strength here of rapport builder, which helps you get along with people. And absolutely, that's fantastic. So when you start a new role or a new organization, you know, you want to say hi to people and be friendly. If you go to that assessment center, you know, you also want to make contact with the people that you're sharing that day and experience with. We've got pride, bounce back, help you to study, work hard for your goals and your grades. I love how you guys are really using the language here to, you know, have a think about, okay, that's what the strength's called, and this is how I'm using it at this moment. So we've got organizer here to help with schoolwork and exceed in your subjects. Awesome. We've got detail to help you identify things that might not be noticed or missed by others in the team. So that's using this language on your, so have a think about all of these strengths on your profile. And this is the language that you're going to use, you know, going forward in that interview. You know, of course, you won't know the particular strengths that those employers are looking for, but you know your strengths, and you'll know how to articulate them. So you're kind of making it really easy for them to score you in all of those processes that you'll go through in that recruitment process. So have a think about not just, but also have a think about the impact of your learned behaviours. And what I mean by that, so I'm just going to go on to the next slide here. So here's some examples of what people say about strengths. So I'm going to go straight for, let's say, work ethic. So, you know, you enjoy working really hard and you have good grades, but, you know, it's about balance. You like having fun with your friends and family. So, you know, it's noticing that whilst you're good at something, you may not necessarily be energized by it. So if you're in a scenario where someone was asking to work overtime, you know, what would you do? Have a think about, but you value work ethic, you know, you can do it, but you also love other aspects of your life too. If you think about realized strengths here, time optimizer and organizer, someone's wrote, you know, they enjoy working backwards from the ultimate objective, you know, setting out steps they need to take and not getting lost in busyness. So for that person, it's all about making the most of every minute. You know, wasting time is not something that they particularly enjoy doing or want to do. So having a think about the type of environments that they'll be in when they're outside of study, you know, how can they still maintain that time optimizer and that organizer? And we think here it's a relationship deepener and connector. You know, their friends and mentor really help them with new perspectives in developing a growth mindset. So if you have those strengths in your profile too, how to think the growth mindset, you know, it's what next? How can I be better and bigger and expand my current horizons? So really tapping into the views of others there. That could also be curiosity and also growth. So have a think about your strengths and start writing out just a few sentences next to each of them and what that means for you and how you're using it now. And you'll be surprised how each of those sentences can come together and make a whole story before you know it. So how can you continue to embrace strengths? You know, back to the beginning, if we think about the strength spotting, when we were picking up on the differences in Ellie's talking about something she drains versus something she loves. So, you know, notice your own energy and also notice other people. You know, oh, I saw your, you know, you didn't really seem too enthusiastic about that. Is, you know, noticing and sharing that with people that, you know, I noticed you were really excited about that, but not so much about that. And using the strengths language to encourage them to really think about, you know, how they want to flourish. Share your profile. If you're comfortable sharing your profile, share it with your friends and teachers, because actually they will help you with your story. So they'll be like, oh yeah, you really used that strength today. And here's another example for you that you can, you know, have a think and have that in your little toolbox and when you need to put it out. Continue to use the strengths language. So if you say rapport builder to me, or you say rapport builder at EY or KPMG or wherever it is you're applying to, and they use strengths, they'll know what you're talking about. You know, you've now got a language to describe that thing. So if you've always said, I love working with people, you know, starting to talk about relationship deepener, rapport builder, connector, all of these, esteem builder, all of these strengths, now you have a language to convey that in a way that they'll understand and really be able to relate to instantly. And just in terms of goals, you know, now we know what strengths are and how important energy is. Set goals and things that energize you. Not only will you enjoy it, but it will be more, you know, people will enjoy working with you. So if it's teamwork, it'll be a great experience. You'll just also enjoy the process more. And I think, you know, we should enjoy what we do. So set goals that energize you and are aligned to your strengths. So I'm going to go now to your career guide. So towards the back of your profiles, it should be like maybe 3rd or 4th page to the back, you should have something called your career guide. So this is a new feature of the strengths profile. And we talked earlier about the top 2 boxes of the quadrant. So the left, the realized strengths and the unrealized strengths. And based on the strengths that appear in those boxes for you, we have your career suggestions. So this is, these are the top 6 sectors that are recommended to you based on your realized strengths. So some of you may have similar recommendations. So, you know, sports and recreation might appear for in quite a few of your career suggestions, but the strengths that you have will be unique on your profile. So if we think back to a few slides when, you know, I mentioned the stories, you know, what is it about those realized strengths? How do they show up for you? So these job sectors are suggestions for you to start looking into potential areas for that next step. Some of you may know the areas that you want to go into and have a look. Do they appear on the career suggestions for you? And also, if you look at the bottom of the page, we have potential career suggestions. So this is based on your unrealized strengths. So they're things that the strengths that underpin these suggestions, they're the strengths you're good at and you're energized by, but you're just not using them very often. So sometimes these suggestions, they might be not the next step, but they might be the step after that. So you might want to maybe explore your career suggestions in the top 6. And then maybe the top 2 is kind of, you know, my plan B or C. But either way, all of the suggestions that feature on this career page, they are job sectors. So within these sectors, there can be roles that you just may not have considered before. But it's a great way to start structuring at what next. So, you know, previously people would have completed a profile and they would have said, okay, but what jobs can I do? So now you have some suggestions to perhaps explore some job sectors that are aligned to not only what you're good at, but also what you're energized by. So how do you explore your career guides? So just have a think about some of these questions on the screen here. And I suppose the main point that I'd like you to drop in the chat function is, you know, which sector excites you that appears on your profile? And if you want to, maybe why? So hopefully some of you will have that career suggestion piece towards the back of your profile. Great, I've got people management that excites you. That's awesome. People management can be a really broad spectrum of, in terms of specific roles you can do. So we have someone's here for government, and that's exciting for them because they're already planning to pursue a career in politics. So hopefully what you know, looking at your career guide, some of these sectors will already be things that you're exploring, and you know, it will kind of confirm that you're on the right path. And also, it can also just, you know, throw you a bit of a curveball, like, oh, I hadn't thought about that, but actually, not a bad shout. So someone's excited about perhaps working in the medical space one day, and they dream about this. So again, you know, that's an indicator of passion and excitement. So that's fabulous. People management, again, I enjoy leadership and working with people. That's awesome. So for those of you who do have like the people management thing or the consultancy, on the definitions, there's a section there that talks about, so next to each of the definitions, there's a small word that will say like relating or motivating. So people management, you really want to focus on the relating strengths there. And how you, and think about your stories around that. So your career guide, absolutely always have that, you know, it's kind of like your personal careers consultant you can look to at any moment of the day. So, you know, how can you apply your career guide? And there's just a few tips here. So, you know, when you do go to those careers fairs, you know, make sure you visit the right tables. It can be a very large space and you might want to say hi to all of them because that might be the rapport builder in you. But in terms of your career decisions and your next steps, you know, be strategic. Have a think about, you know what, there's quite a few employers here that are aligned to my top 6 suggestions. Maybe I should go and visit those and perhaps see the other tables after I've been to visit those. So, you know, we have what we call a personal pitch or an elevator pitch. So thinking about how you can just describe your strengths in 60 seconds or a minute will be awesome. You know, really narrow down your jobs. A job search can be quite daunting sometimes, or, you know, that next where you'd like to go next, or even rank the career suggestions in preference. So the career suggestions are not in any particular order other than alphabetical for you. So the ones that appear at the top are not ones that you should start first, and the ones at the bottom, they're just in alphabetical order. So for yourself, you can rank them in terms of 1 to 6 and how you want to structure your next step. So I'm just going to look quickly now to a few of the questions that we have in chat. So if your planned career is not on the list, should you try to avoid it? And the I wouldn't so much focus there on the career suggestions. So if you have a planned career, I'd go back to the beginning of your profile and have a look at your strengths. So knowing the career and the sector that you have, how will you apply your strengths? So having a look at, when they have a job description or they describe that apprenticeship or that placement, are they describing your strengths or are they describing your learned behaviors? So have a think about, oh no, they're describing my strengths, but it just didn't appear on my career suggestions. I think the career suggestions is definitely if you don't know, or you're like, I don't know what to do next, or I just like a bit of confirmation. That's what it can be useful for. But absolutely, it's not a hard and fast. If something doesn't appear there, don't apply for it. Just maybe focus towards the beginning of your profile, your strengths are, and how you're going to apply that to your particular chosen area. So hopefully that answers your question. And lastly, let the strengths. We can't hear you there, Ellie, so I'm not quite sure. Maybe type it in the chat and I can talk it out for you. But as you're typing it out, I will just continue quickly to the last bit of my presentation here, which is the best self. So if you're interested in continuing to know more about strengths and how you can explore it, or you just want a recap on what the model is, you can visit our website, www.strengthsprofile.com, and along the top we have something called Best Self, and if you watch the video there, it will tell you how to explore all of the resources that are available to you for free. So there are videos, there are worksheets, there are downloads, there are blogs, everything that you'll need to help you continue strengthening, recap on what strengths are. Who knows, in 6 months' time when you might have that job interview or that assessment centre and you want to recap on what realised strengths are, remember Best Self, and there's lots of things that we can help you with there. So I'm just going to quickly go through what does Best Self. The S stands for self-aware. So for those of you who have completed your strength profile, awesome, and you can continue to strength spot in yourself and others. You can then explore your strengths, so you can coach yourself. We do have a book, but all of the materials in this model can also help you. Share your strengths with everybody in your network, because that will help you to. They will spot things in you and give you stories and more content that you didn't even consider before. And then the L is, love what you do. Align your strengths with your goals. I know I've really hammered that point home a lot on today's webinar, but it will just be so much more enjoyable for you and for your employers as well to really be energized and good at what it is you want to achieve. And then lastly, we have flourish. This is about your future. So, for all those strengths that you have on your profile, this is a way down the line, but these are the things that you'll be known for. These are your strengths brands. Those who have humor, that relationship deepener. You won't just be that at work, you'll be that to your friends and your family and in your personal relationships. These are your brands and this is what you'll be known for. So employers want to authentically assess you. So knowing, who you are and who your strengths are will really help you just talk about yourselves. Hey, this is me. And I'm happy with this, and I'm good at this, and I'm flourishing in this, and this is what I'm bringing to your organisation. And it would be like a breath of fresh air for the roles and that next step you're choosing to take. So be your best self. In terms of, we have best self resources on our website, so do take a look at that. If you're thinking, I can't even remember what's a learned behaviour again, there's videos on everything on our websites. So yeah, best self, and I'm going to stop there and pause for any questions that you may have. If you want to drop it into the chat, or if you want to follow up with Pathways and have maybe a coaching session on your profile, that's you can do that too. But I'm just going to pause there and let you throw any questions that you have. So we've got a question here. Can you use the strengths profile, the answers in your applications? Absolutely, not in an application, but you can use it to inspire some of the responses that you may want to give to some of the questions. So if it says, you know, what are your strengths, or what are you good at? When you're energized, what are you doing? Absolutely, you can use some of that content. You can build a LinkedIn profile from it. You can add a summary to your CV or your resume. Absolutely, that's what use every bit of your strengths profile. None of it's going to be wasted. So the second talk, Ellie and her team will be launching the date for that second talk, so you can have that webinar, and my colleague will be on that talk, and she can answer all the questions on interviews and, you know, the technicalities of what employers are, how they're using it, what they're looking for, and all of that kind of stuff. But what I would say is start with knowing your strengths, because once you know your strengths, it doesn't matter what recruitment process you go in, you're just going to shine. So I think that Ellie's mic isn't working at the moment. So I just want to thank you all for taking your time to, you know, join the Strengths webinar today. Hopefully you got something from it and have explored your profile, and it makes somewhat more sense for you. For those of you who haven't completed your profile, please do click on the link that Pathways have circulated to you. It doesn't expire. So if you want to, you know, take a break and maybe do it after the weekend when you've got more headspace to, absolutely you can do that. It's there for you whenever you need it. And if you need some more support on your strengths, or you're curious to know more, just visit strengthsprofile.com and click on Best Self, and you'll have all the information that you need there. And for those of you that are on LinkedIn, please do add me, and if you have any questions, I'm always around to help. So I just want to thank you for your time. I hope to see you all soon on a part 2 of the webinar, and who knows when our paths will cross again. Take care.